Last class I went over how do we animate the background for the Angry Birds, right? If we remember that from a couple weeks ago. So I'm going to show how we can set up the Angry Bird and animate the Angry Bird. I'm not going to do a step-by-step thing. I'm going to do a bullet point part of this because at this point we're getting into the bullet points because it's very similar to stuff we've already done. So I'm going to open up my Angry Bird. Angry Bird BG. Sad bird cleaned. Alright, so here's my sad bird. And in your scenes, I want 3 things animated inside your scene. So you may want to write down, make sure you animate 3 things. Now these 3 things can be on your bird. You could have 2 things on your bird, 1 thing on your background. I don't care. I want 3 different things animated. Everything that gets animated needs to be on a separate layer. So for this Angry Bird, I had specific things that I wanted to animate. I wanted his eyes to be able to move, his eyebrows to be able to move, his beak to be able to move, and his tail to also be able to move, okay? And I also wanted him to be able to squish, right? I wanted him to be able to squish down and stretch out. That's one of the things that you definitely need to make sure you somehow include into that 3 animation thing is that those things move. Now if I were to squish him, what I'm going to notice is that his eyes also squish, his tail also squishes, his beak also squishes. That looks incredibly fake. So I need to make sure that I separate his body from all these other parts that I don't want to squish. So on my layers, you can see how I've separated all of my layers here. Okay, I have his eyes on one layer because I want to be able to grab the eyes and move the eyes around. That way as he's looking up or bouncing up, he's looking up. As he's going down, he's looking down. His eyebrows are separated. If he sees a girl walking down the street, he can just, do one of those deals. His beak is separated. His body is separated. His tail is separated. And then that circle that goes around him is also separated. Okay, so all of those are on individual layers. One thing we found out too, if you go from CC into something like CS6, you actually have to save it here to tell it that you're going into CS6. For some reason, it won't read the layers correctly, and it'll basically flatten everything out. So I recommend save it as CS6 if you're working on CS6 like at home or wherever. All right, so once I have that, yes, I'm going to open my project up. And there it is. So one thing I did that was different than the other assignments is instead of me dropping my Angry Bird stuff right into my same comp, I want to animate the Angry Bird as a separate entity, okay? So here is, there he is. Here is my Angry Bird, and you can see here's how he animates like this. Okay, now that doesn't look like much doing this, but once I put him into the scene, that's just my clean scene. Oh, my Angry Bird. He is here. Where's he at? Let me close some of my layers here, just got too much stuff going on. Come on. All right. Every once in a while this will happen. Under Edit, under Purge, I'm going to say Purge All. And what that does is it erases any memory that After Effects has. So any caching or whatever. It could be trying to read a cache, and that's what's causing it. Or it could just be being stupid.
Sean, I think you have a layer over it.
Oh, I do, thank you. Because I don't have my particular on here, that's why I wasn't showing. There we go. All right, so now there's my Angry Bird. Now, in order for me to get him to do that type of thing, I'm going to show you the 2 different ways. The one way I did it and then the other way, okay? So I'm going to, if I drop in my Angry Bird comp into here, which is how I animated him, he becomes really huge, right? So I just imported him the same way we imported the background. There's no surprise there. So now he's just here. Now if I were to scale him down, I'm going to get this effect. Now I don't want to have all of my Angry Bird layers in here. I wanted to keep those separate. So I animated him separately inside here. So my first step in this mess is that I went through and I just animated him. I went to my position, I went to rotation, and I went back to the beginning and I said, you're going to be off screen. Oops, you're going to be off screen. Okay, so I set a position. I went up a little bit to like 1. I dropped him where he needed to go. Maybe I turned off some of my waves here. Not that one. Oh, it's shied. There we go, and there we go. That way I can actually see where he's at. All right, so I put him onto this one, and then I went up a little bit further, and then I put him onto that one, then I went up a little bit further, oops. And then I put him onto that one, then I went up a little bit further, and then I put him on that one. And then I timed it out, okay? Just like we did the bouncing ball, like on the blip one assignment that we talked about. I just kind of timed this out and said, okay, what is he looking like? Obviously he needs to come up. I went with the pen tool and I pulled these up. And remember, you can hold shift and then break those handlebars. I wish it was consistent across all the programs, but it's not. Oops. Shift. There we go. All right, so then I got him bouncing from one to the other. Boing, boing, boing. Now he's still bouncing because I have the bouncing in the comp. Okay, so at this point I timed it out. I said, okay, well, how does it look going from one to the other? So my first thing that I realized when I did this was when he bounces from this one here to that one, obviously it's a long jump, right? He's going basically halfway across the screen. So I'm going to need more time for that. So I did. I had a lot of frames between these two. But between this one and that one, I really didn't need that much time. So I can probably pull that back. Okay? Now as I pulled that back, it gave more time between these two, which again looked kind of funny because it was too long. So I pulled that back. And then, oops, stop moving that. And then the same thing here, I pulled this back further. Okay? Now in this case, I don't need to use any easy ease on this because my graph is basically my easy ease, okay? My graph is basically setting up all of that stuff. I don't want him to be eased into any of these things because it should already be set up. Okay? So now as I play with this, I can look at the timing. That's all I'm looking at right now is just timing. How does it look going from 1 to 1? Is he moving too fast? Is he moving too slow? Just to exaggerate this further, let me just stretch this way out. Okay, do you see there's a huge difference there? And he goes fast, fast, all of a sudden he's incredibly slow, and then he goes fast again. Doesn't make sense. Right there, that doesn't make sense. He'd be jumping like that. So that's my first step in this, is just moving these things around until I get a good amount of timing on this. Okay, oops, I didn't have him jump off either. Let's go here, we'll jump you off screen. And then we'll move you up like that. There we go. All right, so that's pretty good. I could use some tweaking, but it's good enough for now, okay? So that was my first step. Then I went through and I rotated him. So I would say, okay, right about here, how do I want you rotated? So maybe I rotate him like this a little bit, and then as he jumps into this, like about here, I'm going to angle him forward. All right, so he goes, let's say right here he's actually rotated back a bit. So he goes. So you see how he's rotating there, kind of into the jump. At this point, maybe he's flattened out a bit. We go up a little bit further, like to about here. He's rotated back some. He hits the platform, maybe he's rotated forward. Okay, so I went through and just rotated him some just to, again, give him life. Your animations are about layering things. The first thing I did was position. Now I'm doing rotation. Then I'll go back and tweak all the other movements that I have on him. Now for rotation, this is one that I would ease. So I would use easy ease on rotation just to keep the transitions nice and smooth. And you can see how nice that looks compared to what we just had. Okay, so first position, then rotation. All right, so now what I need to do is go and tweak the eyes. Now if I double click on my sad bird layer, all the stuff is already here. He already has eye movement and all this other stuff. And you can see all the different keyframes that I have inside here to get all of this to work. I'm not going to recreate that right now. I'm just going to recreate a portion of this. So let me just import a new sad bird into this. I'm going to do this as a retain layer size, import, yes, sad bird 2. All right, so that's how he comes in by default with just these layers just like that, okay? So I need to set this up in a way that allows me to deform this guy so that he doesn't do what he was, he doesn't just stay still the entire time, because this is pretty boring if he does that. I'm just going to replace this one with that one. There it is. And you can see how boring this looks. Okay, where he just like really harsh, bounces around. He doesn't have any life to him. If we look at the other one where it is nice and neat, you can see it actually feels a little bit nicer. Oops. And if I turn on the actual one that I used, not the one I just set up, you get a real sense that he's actually bouncing from these. You get a sense that he's actually impacting these rafts, squashing down, and then propelling himself upward. Okay? So what I need to do is I need to set this up so that I can do that. So my first step in this is kind of squashing him down. All right? Now if I go through and I just grab my comp settings just so I can see it better, let me just put a whitish color behind him just so we can see it. If I grab the base bird, which is that, and I go to my scale and I scale him down this way, that's obviously not what I want to do. I want to grab just the Y and just scale the Y down. But again, I don't want to scale it from that point. I want to grab it from here and scale this down, right? Just like we talked about when we did our page transitions, how we can scale from a certain point. That's what I want to do here. So I want to scale them down to there. Now I want the other things to go with them. I want that circle to scale with it, right? If the circle doesn't scale with it, then it's not going to work. So I'm going to go to the circle. I'm going to tell it that it's going to be parented to the base bird. And so now as I scale this down, the circle goes with it. Now I can't parent all the points to him. I can't parent the eyebrows and the eyes and the beak, because then they'll all scale with it. I don't want that to happen. So all of those have to be manually done. Okay? So I'm going to manually move all those around. Now the other thing I need to do is I need to make sure that I can see where it is he needs to squish down, because right now I can't see him squishing. All I can see is this guy being here. So if I go ahead and go back to this and I lock this one here and I go over to here, you can see that it kept it, right? So I'm on sad bird, but I see the background cleaned is what I'm looking at. So as I progress through this, I can see the angry bird. Oops, let me switch it back so I can see my angry bird, number 2. There he is. So that as he comes down here, like that, page up and page down, I can go ahead and forward one frame at a time. Okay, so right here I can go to this and I could set a keyframe and I could scale them down. Now it doesn't update right away, so it's not like a live update. I have to actually just like let go of the mouse and then it will update. So let's say that that is good right there, and I just set a key. I'm going to go back a couple frames and I'm going to stretch them out a bit. Now I don't want to just stretch them out in one direction. If I go like this and stretch them out like that, it's obviously cutting them off. But it's going to look like he's actually getting like thicker and more mass. What I need to do is as I stretch him out this way, I need to scale him in this way. So as this comes up, this part has to go in. Okay? I'm going to exaggerate it a bit more just so you can see it. Alright, so 80 and 120 is where he's at. So he's going to go to, let's say, here, and he'll be at 100. And he's going to go there, and then he'll go here, And again, he'll kind of be stretched out to 120. All right, so let's just look at that first bounce and see what it looks like. All right, so already it feels better than it did before, okay, just because now it feels like we're hitting. So I'm going to go back to the bird. I'm going to jump back here to this point. Okay, so he squashes down, and then right after this, he's going to get stretchier again. So this comes up. This goes back to like 80. All right, so it feels like he's bouncing. It feels much more natural. I'm not paying attention to his eyes. If it bothers you that his eyes are like that, just hide all those things that are bothering you. That way you don't have to look at them. Okay, so this would be my first step after I've animated the position and rotation, is to go through and animate all of these squashes and stretches. So anywhere he's hitting, that needs to be a squash, right? It needs to be like that. Okay, now he's a little bit above this because on my original one here, he's not all the way down. There he goes. So now he's all the way down. He's actually probably a little bit too far down. Let's scoot him up a little bit more. Okay, so now it looks like he's hitting it, and then he's bouncing off and going that way. Maybe this rotation could be a little bit sooner. Maybe this could be a little bit sooner like that. There we go. Okay. So I would go through and do all of those squashes. Just set up all the squashes so that he comes in, squashes, and comes up. Okay? And all of your squashes need 3 points. Okay? You need a stretch right before, a squash, and then a stretch right after. Okay? Those 3 points are going to make it look like he's actually squashing down and stretching out. It's going to make him look a little bit more elasticy. Okay? And then at the very tip of this peak, I always set it back to 100. Okay? That way he's perfectly rounded right there. So you go boing, like this. And then once you have it set up for 1, I can just copy these keyframes and paste them again. And set them back to 100 here. Okay? And so very quickly I can set up those bounces. Okay? And again, it feels like he's actually bouncing. It feels like he's stretching. So once I have all that, I can unlock this. And then what I'm going to do is I can go through and just make sure his eyes are in the right spot. Oops. Okay? Now his eyes and his eyebrows, obviously they can move separately, right? But I think for most things, I would probably have them move together. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a null. And we've kind of talked about these a little bit. But a null allows me to create controls. And that's what I would use this for. So I make this an eye control, and I parent the eyes and the eyebrow to the eye control. And so now when I grab this and move it, it moves both of those. So now I'm grabbing all the eyes and the eyebrows and moving them as one big chunk. So I'm going to go to my position. I'm going to go set a keyframe. And my other keyframes for my base bird are still here. Okay? So another hotkey we can use, if you remember from your hotkey list, I can jump between keyframes by using J and K. So if I go hit K, there's my first keyframe. Hit K again, there's where it's stretched out. So now I can just scoot it up. Not you. Let me lock you. There we go. And I'll scoot this up and get it in position. Now because he's kind of jumping up, I may want to pull these up further. Let me hit K again. Now we squash down. Oops, actually this is the right before he's about to hit the ground, so I'm going to keep that down. He hits the ground, and now he's going to be jumping up, so then his eyes would come up like that. Okay, here he's in the middle, so he's going to be like that. He's still looking down. He's still looking down. Whoops. And now he's starting to look up again. And now he's looking back forward. Okay, so let me just set my end marker here, and this is what we have. Okay, now his eyes are kind of wandering around, so this is where I have to come in and just tweak what this motion is doing. So I have to go in here and say, okay, his eyes are there, then there. Maybe this is like too much of a movement between these two spots. So I'm going to move this one back a bit, like that. And then same thing here, I'm just going to kind of pull these back. Now I still have the ability to control these things individually. So if I'm not liking a position of one of the eyes, I can go under the eye setting here, and I can grab these and just move the eyes without moving the eyebrows. Okay, so I can set keyframes on those individually from that. Okay, I don't have the control in here to control each eye individually because they're both on separate layers. So I can't do that here without going through some other workarounds. Now just a quick way that we could do that, if I duplicated my eyes and I called this one left eye, and I called this one T-Boz. One person gets the TLC joke, seriously? All right, we'll just call this one right eye so don't confuse the people who don't know anything about music. And I take these and I'm just gonna draw a mask around each one. So I'm gonna mask off this one, click that one, mask off that one. There we go. So now I've separated each eye. So this one is just that eye. This one is just that eye. The mask isolates each one of those pieces, okay? So as long as they're separate enough that we could just draw a shape around it, perfect. Otherwise we can't. Like if I wanted to separate this bottom circle from the shape, I can't do that because it's just too close to it. I'd have to go back in Illustrator, tweak it, bring it back in. All right, so now I could tweak these if I needed to and move, let's say, this eye closer or further or whatever away and do whatever I needed to. Okay, it's a weird eye, but it's there. All right, so that's how I would animate the eyes, just position with that null. I also have the beak. So I like to just use nulls to create a lot of these just so I have like a second level of animation to it. So this will be beak control. I kind of position it about where the beak is so it makes sense of where I'm at. Let's say right there. And then I just parent the beak to this one. Okay, and then again it's the same thing. Animate the beak to move with the face. Now I set up kind of markers. The beak is kind of centered right here on the face, and it's kind of centered right there. So as I squish and stretch this, I'm kind of keeping the beak in that same spot. Okay, it's very easy to accidentally put the beak here or put the beak down there. I want to make sure it's about here still. Okay, that way it looks like it's kind of stuck in the center of his face. Same thing, that's how I did that one. The tail is different. The tail is a different story. Now I could go through here and I could animate position on here, but look at the way that this is animated or set up is that we're kind of losing some of this. So I could push this in and just animate it moving around, but it's a tail. It should be kind of soft. It shouldn't be like this hard object moving with it. So what I'm going to do is something different. I'm going to use what's called the puppet tool. So way at the top here, you have the puppet tool pin. This is the same-ish tool that Photoshop would have. You basically pin points and then you're able to animate those points. So if I were to click on this point here, and this point here, and this point here, you can see how I can move these tail feathers. Okay? So I use these 2 points as holding points. Those 2 points are holding the pin in place. Okay? If I didn't have those points and I just tried to click and drag this, it doesn't work. Or if I tried to click and drag this, it's going to grab that whole shape and move it, or grab this whole shape and deform it too much. So I use these ones as pins just to hold it in place, and then I can animate this. I can stretch it out, I can push it in, whatever. I'm not doing anything crazy with these, so I could just do something like that. Very, very subtle. Okay? This automatically has keyframes set on it, so if I just scoot up a bit, and I pull this down and scoot up a bit, oops, I gotta push these guys in. And go like that. You'll see how all of these are going to animate automatically. So I would go through this entire thing and animate that tail moving with it. And again, it's going to take time. In order for you to get this to look correct, it does take time to set that stuff up. Okay? I could have also brought in each one of these feathers as a separate piece. And then I could have puppet tooled each one of those things separately. I could have stretched this out further inside of Illustrator so I didn't have to animate it going left and right. Okay? So once I got done with this, this is what I ended up with. So you can see how his eyes are moving, you can see how his beak is moving, you can see how his beak feels like it's locked into the center of that skin. You can see how his eyes feel like they're stuck onto his in those eyeballs, even though they kind of pop out every once in a while. And his tail even moves too, just like I said before. Okay? And then once we put all that together, there it is. Now I also added sound to this in the final one. Angry Birds, this one. Okay, so once you're done, you'll have something very similar-esque in your own style and setup to what I have. You'll have a title at the beginning of it that says what your project is. You'll have your Angry Bird animation with an audio file, some sort of sound that you grabbed. While this is loading, I don't know why it takes so long. There it goes. Hold on. It is. It's a sad bird. And I could have gone a step further and added sound effects of him actually bouncing, but then that seemed like too cheery, right? And he's a sad bird, so he didn't have that. Okay. Now my file, just so you can see it, is only 11 megabytes. So like we talked about before, saving it as QuickTime, saving it as H.264. Just so you can see that process again in case you've forgotten. I'm going to go to my final comp. That's not it. That's the wave. There it is. Here is this. Okay. So I have my title here. I have my text. Pops in the same way we talked about when we did our text for our lower third. There's my Angry Bird cleaned. And then here is just this little end bit. Audio provided by bensound.com. And so that's a website that I found pretty recently. It has a bunch of cool audio files, and they're free. All you have to do is put at the end of your video, audio provided by bensound.com. Here's dubstep, so if you want to start picking up some dubstep. And it's 2 minutes long, which is a pretty decent size for some of these. And if they played, it would be great, but they're not going to play right now. The internet sucks. All right, so once you have all this stuff together, then you go and export your movie out. QuickTime. Go to Format Options. This is the part that people usually forget. H.264. If you leave it at animation, turns out horrible. My audio file from bensound was a 44.1. So I'm going to go back to my QuickTime settings and make sure that this is set to 44.1. You can, it just sounds horrible. You can sample higher, but it sounds horrible. So you sample at whatever setting it was. So 44.1. 16-bit should be fine. My audio was 32-bit, so I can set it to that. And then for my settings here, I typically use Apple Lossless. Sometimes, depending on what you have, if you have vocals, sometimes you need to play with this because this Qualcomm one is meant for things that actually have vocals inside it. So you have to play with those sometimes. So Apple Lossless should be good. Then I go there and I specify where this is going to go into my work. Angry Bird. I put my name on here. And then I make my movie, and it should come out again as a 44 or a 11 megabyte movie. Okay? So again, you're going to turn in, and make sure you turn in all the stuff that you need for that project. So if you turn in just your After Effects file, it doesn't give me your Angry Bird or your background or any of your other stuff, which I need to see. So make sure you turn in all of your After Effects stuff. Make sure you turn in all of your artwork. Make sure you turn in, that's just my backup folder. And then make sure you turn in your sound. Okay? So that's going to be our Angry Bird project. We're going to work on this the rest of this week. Next Monday, a week from today, we're going to start the next project, which I'll talk about on Wednesday. Okay? Any questions? Yes, sir. This will be due Monday. Okay? Anything else? Alrighty.